probably no hands will go up, maybe one. There's always an outlier. Some time ago, maybe 18 months ago, I read a story about a woman from some college walking down the street. She was so wrapped up in texting that she fell into an open manhole. Fell into some sewage. They whisked her out, and you know what? She never dropped her phone. That's pretty amazing. But when you think about it, we live in a culture where people are addicted to their smartphones. I don't think that's a bad thing or a good thing. I just think that's the reality. How many of you walk across the street texting or checking email? Probably most of you, right? I do too. In some ways, what we're doing is we're finding ways to be productive at times that were traditionally not productive. And so obviously we live in a time of hyperconnectivity, and this panel here is going to help us think about these issues and what you, as marketers, or as people in companies, or startups, or entrepreneurs, or just people really fascinated by this topic, what we can do. So what I'd like to do, without much further ado, is pass it off to the panel here and ask each person to identify themselves and tell you a little bit about themselves, and then we'll move from there.
Okay. Good morning. I'm Cheryl Connolly. I am the Global Consumer Trends and Futuring Manager for Ford Motor Company. I've been with Ford for 15 years, and after holding a variety of positions, wholesaling cars, working on customer service programs, I wanted a dramatic change in my career. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I was ready for a shift, and I accidentally landed into the job of Trends and Futuring. And it's the day that I feel like I won the lottery. My job is to look outside the automotive industry. I'm probably the only person in the company that would tell you that I'm really not particularly passionate about cars. My job is to look at things outside that category, trends that are related to social, technological, economic, and environmental and political arenas. And our hope is that if we study those things and we see how they're shifting on the horizon, that we'll understand the forces that will shape consumer values, attitudes, and behaviors.
Good morning, I'm Paul Isaacson. I'm the Director of Strategy for Call McVoy. We're an integrated agency based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Do work for Caribou Coffee, General Mills, Novartis, Schwinn, several other great brands. My background is in the world of consumer insights, account planning, possibly best known maybe here for being Don Draper on Twitter and starting the whole Mad Men on Twitter phenomenon. Just a little fun experiment to see what would happen. And I'm excited to talk to you this morning.
Hi, I'm Faith Popcorn, and you're not, but she is. No. And I started this company, my company, Faith Popcorn's Brain Reserve, in 1974. Being a futurist, I was 10 years too early. Nobody knew what a futurist was. And basically, Faith Popcorn's Brain Reserve services the Fortune 200. And what we're dedicated to actually is to help them see what's coming. It's like seeing the train, you know, what's coming, and help them prepare for it. So we're telling them, you know, what consumers are going to be wanting in the next decade, how to take what they make and make it future safe, future perfect. And we have a trend bank. You can go on our website and look at it, faithpopcorn.com. And on this trend bank really is practically my own DNA. It's 17 trends that really tell you and what's going to happen if you care to see it. So we were talking in our, in our group, Mark and Ted here and Kirk. They're in my company, and one of the things about being in my company is that you see things that are maybe you don't want to see, and it really changes your DNA to work at Faith Popcorn's Brain Reserve. So I invite you to join our talent bank, 10,000 members globally. If you have an interest, and I know yours is not cars, that you are passionate about, and it's really called the Intellectual Club of the Globe. So if you're passionate about something, come on and join our talent bank. So thanks so much. I'm very happy to be here. I feel very connected to you.
So, what exactly is Ford doing about this big change coming afoot, the whole movement towards smartphones and hyperconnectivity? What exactly are you doing these days?
Well, trying to understand what's behind it. So from a trend perspective, we started talking about it probably 5 years ago, and we identified the trend as information addiction. And we've been seeing a lot of things in the scanning that suggested that it was going to be a driving force. And we wanted to understand, we're always interested in the why. Why are these things happening? What's behind it? And what we believe is that information addiction is a trend about control. When you have information at your fingertips in a just-in-time fashion, it means that you're better able to control your environment. You're presented with more opportunities. You're able to influence the people around you more. It translates often to greater success, affluence, power. And so we wanted to know, why was that the case? And we talk about these as the drivers of the trend. One is that we think consumers are much more inclined to scrutinize the world around them. There's growing mistrust in business, government, and media, and the age of transparency, this information addiction allows individuals to kind of scrutinize the world, figure out what's important to them. The second driver of it is that we all live in an era of what was called time poverty, and this is an age-old sentiment that people don't have enough hours in the day to do what they want to do. You can find, since the dawn of time, that people say there's just not, I don't know what's happening to society, kids are more unruly and there's not enough hours in the day. But there's something very unique about it at this point in time, and it's because of the technology that we have, living in the phenomenon of a 24/7, 365-day, online connectivity, and it leaves people very exhausted. So information addiction allows a lot more spontaneity, allows more the ability to plan less, to act in the moment. The last driver of it is that we think that information having in your fingertips in this just-in-time fashion translates into status, being recognized as a go-to resource among your friends, your family, and your colleagues. And it doesn't mean that you're the smartest person in the room. It just means that you're known for expertise in any one particular area. It could be wines, it could be fine dining, it could be having the most successful fantasy football league. So those things are the way that people live. And we found that with connection, people expect that connection at home and the office and everywhere in between. So the approach within Ford is to find a way to enable that. Enable it when you're still in the car, but do it in a way that doesn't distract from driving. And of course, that's the challenge, right? This distracting driving is really so topical and such an issue, and you talk about this woman who falls into a manhole. It's much more dangerous when you're behind the wheel, and it's not just you, it's the other cars that are on the road. So we developed a platform called Sync, which allows you to take all of this handheld mobile device technology and integrate it into the vehicle, hands-free and voice-activated. And it wasn't designed from a safety feature, but we think it's the safest way to use the technology, where your eyes are on the road and the hands are on the wheel.
From the agency side, you're dealing with smaller screens, you're dealing with people who are barrage of information. So advertising has changed a little bit in the last 10 years. Can you talk a little bit about what you see as the big changes that are occurring now and where it's going?
Yeah, I think we saw a good bit of that right before this in the hyper-fragmentation of things. And you have people who are constantly connected. I was just having dinner or brunch actually yesterday before I flew out here with someone who said, she's got the TV going, she's got her iPad going, her laptop, and her phone at any given time on the couch. It's like her command central. And she goes to different screens for different things and different needs. So it's a challenge to put the right content in front of the right people. I mean, it really gets down to understanding behaviors and needs and desires and taking an anthropological view of the world and understanding what people want from a device and what information is appropriate based on where they are. The point about people, having their phone right by them while they're playing a video game so they can find out how to get past a level or find out maybe a cheat code or something hidden is very real. And so it's just a world we have to deal with, and it's changed everything. We can't buy an ad and just shove it in front of people anymore. You have to make them want to engage with you and want to be involved with you. It's not that old media is going away, it's still important. You look at Old Spice and The Man Your Man Can Smell Like, that did what it did because TV was behind it, and it had an amazing online extension, but it wouldn't have been what it was without that TV support. So it's finding the right ways to combine those and do it in a fun way that gives people little surprises at each place that gives them something new or something different.
Faith, how does all this stuff going on change identity? Faith's team of people sent me a whole list of questions, so kind of fun.
You asked for that. Change identity. Well, you know our DNA is changing with this hyperconnectivity. We are actually evolving as a species. If you notice movie cuts, just as like an ordinary example, are much faster because our brains are like going off like bang, bang, bang. It's almost impossible to do one thing at a time now. We call that 99 lives. We're running many, many channels. Actually, women are phenomenal at this because their brains fire off left, right, left, right, left, right. So that's really well formed for the decade ahead. And soon, and we'll talk more about that, we won't really need any device. Because, and they're already, I mean, you know, the CIA actually, my dad was CIA, but CIA has been working on this for a long, long time about how you can, you know, use your mind. You're only using 10% of your brain and 90% sitting there to move things. They're doing these nets over your brain already. That was just in the New York Times. This is not even science fiction, where you can actually, they can read images and you can move things. It's a little bit scary if you're still worried about privacy, but you really shouldn't because that's over. I mean, it's gone. And you know, it's not an addiction, it's a DNA correction or an expanding of our genealogical base. In our talent bank, we have many ethical genealogists, you know, trying to figure out, you know, about this. And, you know, is an avatar, like, how real is it? And all the stuff you've been reading, like thinking that's never going to happen, is happening right now. So, you know, projection is, you know, actually our game. And I think it's important to look at, you know, we say, excuse me, advertising, you know, that's so over. Because, you know, anytime you look at this, and that's part of the problem about all these ads, if the consumer believes that you're paying for the time, they don't really believe in it. So they don't like that. So they want to believe, we call it in-culture marketing. They want to believe, even if you've manipulated it somewhat, that something's dropped into the culture and it's like the DNA strands of what you've dropped in mixes up with the DNA strands of the culture. So we're working on that model, you know, as we speak.
Well, is it advertising dead, or is advertising as we know it changing?
Whatever advertising is always going to be around. It's just not what we've known forever. We have people creating software platforms now that are a way to get their brand in front of people. You have people engaging in social media and conversations. So the world of advertising as we knew it, of buying media space to get a message in front of people, that world is shrinking down, and there'll still be a role for it. I mean, we still have the most primitive form of advertising around today. You still see sandwich boards walking around streets and things. So old advertising doesn't go away, it just shrinks in its importance and new forms take place of the primary importance. So as things evolve, I think you'll still see brands sponsoring things, brands putting things out there. They just have to be more conscientious of what they're creating and really make sure it has value or usefulness or something that gives the viewer, the engager, the person engaging with it, something of value.
Can you give some specific examples of some perhaps advertising campaigns that have worked well on mobile platforms?
That's a really good question. I've been looking into some of the stuff that was talked about with American Express and Foursquare. They've got a really fun campaign going on right now where they help you identify your travel profile. So you take a quiz, you get 15 profiles, you end up with 1 or 2 or 3 of them, and then if you want to engage in the actual thing, it's almost like you're going on a reality show where you call an agent, they find out more about what you want to travel with and where you want to go and what you like to do, what your budget is. And if you agree to it, then like 3 days later, you get a mobile device in the mail and you launch it and it tells you, pack your bags, you're going to Amsterdam in 3 days. And you can choose to engage with it in whichever way you want, from my understanding. So you can get the information suddenly and just kind of be more spontaneous, or you can look ahead and kind of plan for your trip. So brands are finding interesting ways to use mobile and integrate it into their programs and not necessarily using it in an advertising way.
And what about, obviously we talk about different generations consuming media differently. Fred earlier talked about if you're a company, you should hire kids right out of college because they look at things differently. I teach graduate students and undergrads, and I can tell you that yes, they do think about things differently. And And so I guess the question for me is, like an iconic brand like Ford, how exactly do you parse your marketing in mobile in a generational way, or do you try to find something that hits all generations that they may hold in common? How do you approach that?
The generations are a really great foundation, but I think in terms of advertising, you know, the general rule is I think what's changing in advertising is that there are more things competing for our attention. So if I'm a consumer and I give you my attention, you better give me something back in return. And so I think the mandate is that advertising has to educate, entertain, or inform. You know, so there has to be some value proposition if I'm going to give you my attention. And so our approach is to try to do it that way. When you look across the generations, though, we know hands down the millennial generation, so people that are 30 and under, you know, the way they use technology is so integral to the way they see the world, and they're multitasking, and how do we hold their attention, and what are the means in which we do it. So we do have campaigns that are dedicated just for mobile applications or online. So one of the things that's been very successful for us is this little orange velvet sock puppet named Doug, and he's kind of the anti-corporate guy. He's, you know, like an evil Muppet, if you will. And so they have him paired with a corporate Ford person who's, you know, launching the new Ford Focus, and you see them do battle back and forth. And so it allows us an opportunity to say things that Ford might not otherwise have put into our marketing campaign because it's coming, you know, from a puppet. But it's just engaging, and people seem to really be taken by the way, the entertainment element of it. So we get posts where people will say, could Doug give a shout out to so-and-so who's having a birthday? You know, and there's the persona. I think people enjoy the ongoing engagement that provides.
One of the things that we, in journalism and also I guess in marketing and all walks of life, we talk about is mind share. How exactly do you get people to pay attention to what you're doing in this, you know, sea of other opportunity? And so, you know, for example, in the old days, if I bought a New York Times or Daily News, I would take the train in from the suburbs or take the subway, and I would read the paper, and it monopolized my attention. And so, you know, basically I had two alternatives. I could read the newspaper or talk to the really strange guy sitting next to me. And the paper would win out every time. But now when we have mobile devices, not only are you competing, you know, if you're a newspaper, not only are you competing against other newspapers, you are competing against everything. You're competing against people checking email, surfing the web. You're competing against people shopping. You are competing against people doing all sorts of things on these little devices. And so when people are immersed in that world of their device, they almost have an infinite number of places they can go and things they can do. And so how do you reach these people? And I guess really, ultimately, the question is, and this is a good question for Faith, is how does this change who we are?
I mean, totally. It totally changes who we are. There's an RFID, is that right? Chip that tells you, first of all, it tells you what's in a food. Second of all, it tells you where that food is in your body, as if you weren't psycho enough to know it's gotten stuck somewhere. And this transparency that this kind of hyperconnectivity gives us is just wild. What's happening now is, we don't like to call them consumers because it makes them seem hungry, but people, human beings, are very anxious to get behind the scrim, see what the company's made of, see, and it's totally possible, like, are there any distaffs, by that I mean women, Black, Hispanic, Chinese, on the board? Do these board members, are they behaving properly in their own lives? Do the people that run the companies, are they somebody that you'd really actually want in your home or have dinner with? And especially females are looking at companies very, very closely. So in a sense, the way it changes who you are is that it makes the purchase decision, it happens instantaneously. I mean, you can hold your phone up and know everything about that board right on the package. So like if you're an SCJ, SC Johnson, you know, really the family company or company for families, a good company, you know, with a good guy running it, yes, if you're another kind of Fortune 200 where maybe you're not behaving very nicely in your life, not so great. And people are making purchase decisions based on that. That's why Tom Shoes are going crazy. Where's the Tom Shoes of cars? You know, where's the one-for-one of cars? You know, what are we doing about that? And when Tata came along, excuse me for saying Tata, okay? Because I love Ford. I love American. So, but when Tata came along, look what happened. I mean, everybody goes, I want one of those. A car is pet, you know, little something, a little tiny thing. And I think this whole world is going to be about, I want to call it uber transparency. And it's changing the brain waves. And you know, we have a million numbers, maybe I'll publish them if you want me to, about like what this kind of hyperconnectivity is doing to young people. It's creating addiction. Same addiction, little fire-offs are happening, and it's creating an incredible, and we can talk about this later, but interest in pornography. Pornography is the #1 thing on the internet. Tremendous interest and addiction as it becomes more dangerous to actually, you know, have sex in the human way. So things are definitely changing.
All right. So
You know, can I add to Faith's
Please do.
answer? We have a trend that we call ethical consumption, and we talk about the idea that in the marketplace we're faced with more choices, unprecedented level of choices. And so when you think about price, quality, convenience, and service, those are still paramount to a purchase decision. But we also want to know, what does the product stand for? What are the values of the company behind it? And when you talk about identity, I think we consciously and unconsciously are drawn to products that reinforce the identity that we're trying to project. And the identity could be tied to sustainability, human rights, but it could be politics or religion. One of my favorite examples is Chick-fil-A, which is a fast food restaurant in the South. And if you were to go to Chick-fil-A's website and look at their mission statement is to glorify God and be faithful stewards of all that's entrusted to them. And they do it in such an interesting way that here's a brand that has really transparent values, but they never alienate anyone who doesn't share it. But I think that is about this identity. So if I support that, if I support something like Tom Shoes, I'm letting people around me know that I'm educated about world issues, and I respect this brand because I'm trying to do something to make the world a better place. And those things in this hyper-connected world, if you will, those values are much more transparent. And so I think brands have greater responsibility to make sure that we're delivering something to the people who decide to associate with it, that we're enhancing their own personal brand image.
Now, isn't that harder for a multinational corporation like Ford as it would be for a smaller company like Chick-fil-A? Because you can end up also alienating large numbers of people by pursuing whatever political or environmental or any other stance that you may have. And if you're going for a mass market brand, wouldn't that be more complicated then?
Indeed, it would be. But there's an argument that talks about, with this hyperconnectivity, values are becoming more universal. And so they're less fragmented regionally. And I think Ford, being a 100-year-old company, there are things that are core to our DNA that define who we are, that will always be part of our brand. One of my own personal pet peeves about the discussion around sustainability in the automotive space is that it has somehow been narrowly defined into things like miles per hour. But sustainability is really, in its truest form, much broader than that. It's about community and the environment and things like that. And that's a space that I think Ford is uniquely positioned in, because it speaks to the type of way that Henry Ford, our founder, did in terms of building a community around building cars. So literally, when we had employees that couldn't afford the vehicles that they were making, he said, this is wrong, we need to change the pay paradigm so these people will eventually be able to own these vehicles that they build. And we need to make sure that they have a school that their children could be educated in. And we need to make sure that we have a hospital that can treat these families. And this is the nature of how Dearborn, Michigan was formed. So it was always about community. But it's not, it gets lost in the marketing messages. I mean, one of my proudest things about Ford is that in Silverton, Africa, we have a plant that test all of our employees for HIV and AIDS, and we encourage them to bring their family members in, and that we provide antiviral drugs and a regimen of treatment for them. But that's not part of our marketing platform. It's just part of the DNA of who we are in terms of making sure that we have a community that's strong and healthy.
Paul, you know, whenever there's great change, there's a lot of confusion. I think many of us in this room feel that way. We don't really know what to do to successfully either advertise something or to market a message, or you know, it's very easy to just sit on your hands or throw up your hands and say, I just don't know what to do. So what do you tell clients? What do you tell them if they want to have some sort of mobile initiative? And you know, what are the first few things you tell them, and how do you help them come up with the right answer for them?
Yeah, the first thing we do is try to understand what they're trying to accomplish, of course, and then it really comes down to understanding the people they're trying to connect with and what those people are doing with their mobile phones. And so this is where I think, you know, as we move forward in the industry, you're going to see more teams of anthropologists, technologists, and designers going into the field than you have in the past, and treating it much more like product design, where you're trying to actually understand problems people have in their lives and how you can solve them using technology. And so by looking at how the people you want to reach are actually using their phones in their day-to-day lives and understanding what they're doing, when are they playing games, when are they looking for information, when are they trying to find out more about a company, all of those different things. You just try to understand their behaviors and then design tools and content for them that fit those. So depending on what you're trying to accomplish with your brand on the mobile device, then that should drive your content, and your approach is the actual behavior of the people you're trying to connect with.
Questions from the audience? Anyone have questions? You have to have questions.
Hey, good morning. Brandon Gerson from Mack & Gurr. We're a social listening agency, and I wanted to touch on that question that Paul just answered. Obviously, we are becoming much more hyper-connected, and one of the challenges that marketers, I think we all face, is return, dealing with our clients. How do we establish a return, whether it's return on investment or what we've been going towards is return on engagement? So as we're using a lot of these social channels, how, in your guys' experience, have you been measuring the return that clients are getting from these different social or hyper-connected marketing efforts?
So the question is, what is the return on investment? Tangibly, you mean, or?
Not even, because we try to kind of stray away from return on investment. We don't want the client to actually put a dollar value to a follow or a retweet or something like that. But how have you guys, in your experience, kind of spun that to the client as saying, okay, you know, this is the type of return that we are getting for this budget that we've put towards social or towards our initiative that are engaging people who are hyper-connected?
I guess the question is, how do you measure success?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I'll start. There's a number of ways to measure it. I think you're looking at people who are trying to put dollar values on followers or friends or retweets and things, and it's just really difficult to do. That, you know, advertising's always had the challenge of being proven to work. There's the quote by Wanamaker, I think, about 50% of my advertising works. I just don't know which 50% it is. It's still the case, and with these new tools that we have, you can't necessarily prove what it's doing, but at the end of the day, we try to track how many people engaged with it, how long did they spend with it, what were they saying about it, were they passing it on, and what was going on with the business during that time, or what were the results of the business during that time following that. So trying to see if this stuff worked, and we're still in a gauge where it's like I said, it's new, trying to understand how it works, and the best way is just to do your best of tracking it, all the data you can, looking at patterns, looking at things to see what's driving business, and keep doing what works and evolve what doesn't.
And could I flip that question aside around a little bit and ask Faith, from the perspective of the actual person with the hyper-connected device, what would define success?
An intimacy with a company. So you see, you know, society is falling apart, in case you haven't noticed. Ethics, environment, you know, the economy at one time, so it's like the triangle that crashed. So if you really believed, and think about what it would take you to believe this, that this company was on your side, that's it. So what I tell our clients to do is call your 800 number with a complaint and see what happens. And chairmen should answer those 800 numbers. We tell our chairmen, hi, this is Fitz Johnson. If you call this number, you must have a problem, and I elected these people to handle it. If they don't, please email me or call me. I'll get it done. That's what makes, so that human quality is still really, really important, and most companies are just don't have it.
All right, another question?
Hi, Lisa Traeger. I'm a consultant. And the thing that I hear a lot from regulated industries is their fear of social media. What advice would you give to a company who is, scared to
You should be
engage?
scared. Social media pulls down the veil. So I tell our clients and our friends, and I tell you, if you're doing the right thing and telling the truth, there's nothing to be afraid of.
How do you?
Well, I think that organizations have to realize that we no longer own our brands. You know, it used to be marketing was kind of a monologue to the marketplace. The corporation would say, here's who we are, come buy our stuff, we're wonderful. And social media changes that. The nature of it is that we no longer own our brand. The discussion is taking place, and whether you're part of it or not, it's going to take place. So it's incumbent on you to get involved, to engage. Because if you're not engaged, that'll bear out in the marketplace, and it will affect your market share and your profitability in the long run. Because to Faith's point, I think consumers, they want to be heard. They want to know that we care, that there's some sort of basic connection.
Another question?
You have one up front.
Is that up front? Yeah.
Karen Levine, my consulting practice is Triple Play Consulting. I definitely agree that Gen Y and the college generation is much more mobile, but I've been surprised in asking them about social. And sometimes I find that I'm more social than they are, especially LinkedIn, also Twitter, sometimes Facebook. They probably use YouTube more. And I was wondering if anyone else has found that.
My comment is slightly different. My response is slightly different. I think it's interesting. We spend a lot of time worrying, if in our space in automotive, we talk about distracted driving. And, when you talk about that, the thing that instantly comes to mind is the teenager who's texting and listening to music, and they've got a car full of friends that are doing it. But I'm much more concerned about the middle-aged worker who works on the road, and their productivity depends on how much they can, accomplish in one day. And I think if you think about it, I think that the technology is equally important across the ages, but I think that a young person uses it for a social outlet, and older generations, the Gen Xers, the baby boomers, they use it for productivity. They use it to accomplish something, and if they're not accomplishing stuff, they're worried about losing their job at the end of the day. So I, in my mind, am a little bit more worried about that distracted worker who no longer has an office to report to, that has a larger territory, that has just absorbed the work that had previously been done by 2 or 3 people, and now are trying to manage all of that well behind the wheel of a car.
Hey, Paul, is it hard to reach a distracted person?
Actually, I don't think so, if you have something to say. Actually, it's easy. They're distracted because nothing's really catching their focus, so they're like, meh. And I think a consumer in motion is grabbable.
Yeah, there's so much content out there now, it's impossible to keep up with it all. I think the latest number I saw on YouTube was 35 hours of content uploaded every minute or something crazy like that. So, and we all know how much crap is on YouTube. So if you have a good ideas spread. And if you put that out into the world, and brands have the dollars to put that out in the world in a bigger way than any individual ever does. So unless you're a billionaire, but the brands have the money to get it out there. So if you have a good idea, that will spread if it's targeted, if you understand the people you're trying to reach, if you understand how to help them. On teens and social media and young people on social media, it makes sense that they're not on LinkedIn or some of these other places yet because they're not in the workforce. But I think just going off of gut reaction to what you're saying, it's like kids don't want to be where their parents are. And so if they don't want their parents spying them on the Facebook, why would they be on Facebook? They'd much rather engage in a more private place. And
like Tumblr.
using Tumblr or using their just text. Text messaging is huge with youth. And the numbers of text messages you see people reporting them sending is out of control. But that's what they're doing, and it's a more private way to engage.
They don't want to talk. They want to text. And you asked about DNA change. That's definitely changing young people's brains. They're just like insular, totally connected but insular. sitting in their rooms. In Japan, they call them the hikikomori. They don't come out of their homes sometimes for 10 years. So, you know, it's tough. There's going to be a whole psychiatric practice about this. Look forward to that.
You know, actually, I, as a professor, I actually have noticed the same thing you have. And I always require students to engage in social media as part of what I teach, and also to blog. And you'd be amazed at the high numbers of people in their 20s who have never blogged, and the even higher numbers of people in their 20s who are afraid of getting on Twitter. And part of what I have to do is show them that, well, today every journalist has to be in these two places, or you can't succeed. And so it is really funny. And I've always heard that, oh, kids are so much better at technology than us adults, but I don't see it that way. I think they're really good at texting, but I don't think they really understand technology. And so I think that gives a tremendous advantage to people who actually do. Is that it?
Okay, let's thank our panelists for a fascinating discussion today.